Friedrich Wilhelm Nietzsche was born on October 15, 1844, in Rocken, a small town in Prussia, into a Lutheran family. His father, Karl Ludwig Nietzsche, was a Lutheran pastor, and his mother, Franziska Nietzsche, came from a family of pastors. Friedrich had two younger sisters, Therese and Elizabeth. From a young age, Nietzsche showed exceptional talent and great artistic sensitivity. At the age of 4, he lost his father, which had a profound impact on him and his emotional development. His mother moved with the children to Naumburg, where Nietzsche grew up in a pious and disciplined environment. Nietzsche received a humanistic education at the Forta boarding school, where he stood out for his intellectual brilliance and his interest in classical literature and philosophy. In 1864, he entered the University of Bonn to study classical philology and theology, but soon moved to the University of Leipzig, where he graduated in philology in 1868. During his university years, Nietzsche was attracted to the ideas of Schopenhauer and Wagner, whose music and philosophy had a profound influence on his thinking. After earning his doctorate, Nietzsche was appointed professor of classical philology at the University of Basel at the young age of 24. In Basel, Nietzsche developed intense academic and literary activity. He published several books on classical philology that were well received by the academic community. However, his health began to deteriorate due to digestive and eye problems, forcing him to resign from his position in 1879. From that moment on, Nietzsche dedicated himself completely to his career as a writer and philosopher. In 1881, he published The Will to Power, a work in which he began to develop his most original and radical philosophical ideas. In it, Nietzsche criticizes traditional philosophy and proposes a new vision of the world based on the will to power as the fundamental force of life. In 1883, he published Thus Spoke Zarathustra, his most famous and controversial work. In it, Nietzsche presents the figure of the Superman, a human being who transcends traditional values and creates his own values based on his will to power. The work also explores themes such as the eternal return and the death of God, which would become recurring themes in his philosophy. During this time, Nietzsche also maintained intense social and intellectual activity. He interacted with important figures of the time, such as Lou Andreas Salome, a Russian intellectual and writer who had a great influence on his thinking. Nietzsche fell madly in love with Lou, but her love was unrequited, which deeply marked her life and his work. In 1888, Nietzsche suffered a nervous breakdown that left him incapacitated for the rest of his life. He was cared for by his mother and his sister Elizabeth, who was responsible for publishing and disseminating his work after his death. Throughout his life, Nietzsche was a provocative and controversial philosopher. His ideas on morality, religion, and culture have been the subject of intense debate and controversy. Nietzsche fiercely criticized Christianity, which he considered a decadent religion that denied life in favor of a future life in the afterlife. His affirmation of the death of God and his proposal of the Superman were interpreted as a radical rejection of the traditional values of Western society. Despite his genius, Nietzsche was also the subject of criticism and misunderstanding. His work was misinterpreted by some as justifying nationalism and militarism, especially during the Nazi era in Germany, when his sister Elizabeth used his philosophy to promote anti-Semitic and nationalist ideas. Friedrich Nietzsche died on August 25, 1900 in Weimar, at the age of 55. Despite his untimely death, Nietzsche left a philosophical and literary legacy that has had a profound influence on Western culture. His work continues to be the subject of study and debate around the world, and his figure continues to be a source of inspiration for many who seek to understand the meaning of life and the role of the individual in the world. Finally, don't forget to subscribe, and if you want to know more about the most important philosophers in the world, tell me in the comments for more videos.